Yesterday, when we were talking a little bit about the syllabus and the filled out, I went on to, this is what our teachers are supposed to be handing out to their students and posting on their web pages. So I went to give y'all a sample of what one looked like. This is Miss Doggett, and it's posted on her website. She's got one for each of her 9th grade pre-AP, her 10th grade, and then her AP Lit, right on her teacher page. And she's been to LTF training, and so she usually follows that in addition with her own stuff. And so I thought I would do this to you as an example of what it looks like and what, of course, really good one looks like. But anyway, she's got specifics to tell about when her 2nd periods and her 5th periods meet, because those are her classes and those are the block days. What some of the major work she'll be doing, the short stories she'll be doing, the poetry, some of the songs, additional things that she brings in for the different units, the nonfiction as well as the grammar that she'll be using. And then she's got her unit focus, and then what she's got going on as far as what some of the assignments are. She took the grade column off. That grade column that I had on there, that's so, I don't know how y'all feel, but students are always asking what their grade is and stuff. So I added that column when I was in the classroom because I always worked on a points system so that the kids could keep up with, if they didn't want to act this sign out when they got their assignments back, they could put down what their grade was. So you can take that column off if you want. For each class on the back, she's got like the turnitin.com credentials that they have to use for that class, what the online textbook codes are, her course of study, and then you know, a couple of other things like that. So anyway, this is an example of one that's really good, and like I said, it follows the 9th grade pre-AP curriculum if you've been to like LTF or if you plan on going to E3 training this summer. So, was everybody able to access any of that stuff that I sent y'all yesterday? Okay, at home or anything like that? I don't know if anybody looked at it after they left. One of the things that was brought up, and we're going to talk a little bit about the literacy standards today, and really get into the planning that you all have to do, because by tomorrow I'd like for you to send me, by the end of the day, your first 9-week syllabus as well as the module that you've created, at least one module. After lunch tomorrow, what we're going to do is everybody should be able to wrap up that module that they've been working on by like tomorrow morning before we leave, before we break for lunch. At lunchtime, if you will email it to, or you can print it out to someone, we're going to do a peer review based on the rubric of the module that you've created, so that you have that opportunity to tweak it and everything before you email like that final submission, by giving it to another teacher either at your school or maybe having a cohort 1 teacher look at it, so you can get that feedback and say, oh yeah, I didn't think about looking at it this way. And you know, again, ways to approach it. What do you think about doing this? Or sometimes we write things down and we think that it's obvious to us, just kind of like I did with the syllabus. But sometimes, you know, if we have someone with fresh eyes that have never been through our, well, hopefully they've been through your content, but since we're all college graduates, but you know, that what does it mean when you do this, or what will you be doing? And even in the templates we looked at for the modules, you know, that's kind of like a note shorthand for a teacher, so the teacher knows what they're doing. It's not something that I would leave just like that for a substitute. But just to be able to get that feedback, I think would be really good. And just sometimes even talking through something will help you to see if there's any areas where you may need to be a little bit more specific or to clear things up. So does that sound like a plan? Everybody get everything off of here that you need for today? All right, well, go on and let's get that, and we'll get started going over some of this stuff about with the content standard. And sign each other over here. No, I got it. I'll get it.
I didn't write it down by the way. This is my lunch. I'm already hungry. I hate when I have to let me an LDC folder because that to me is all. What? David, are you one of those 1,562 email people? And what tons of emails?
Oh, yes.
She was wearing her on Facebook. There's two types of people in the world.
Yeah.
Inbox 0, inbox 62,513. I have
She tagged me in it.
I have 12.
Because Laura Sharp tagged you in it because she said we both like that. Laura comes to mind. I'm like, don't look at this because
I know, I can't. This stretches. I have 12.
You take in here, she has like the days of the week.
Oh, honey, no, I can't.
what is it?
4,620.
Oh, I can't.
Mine's 2,000 something.
You want it to look like this?
I have 12,
Days of the week.
and the rest of the stuff's in
totally
this
up to
place,
you.
and I'm fixing to make
Okay,
a
let me
folder.
ask you this.
But I
If
have-
we plant, if I
have
plant
like
LDC, whatever.
and it doesn't work.
I have 3 different
I'm sorry, I can change it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you, because sometimes in my mind, what I think will
And then I
work
have my
doesn't.
personal email that I
absolutely.
started
That's
using
okay.
for like stores and
Okay.
stuff. And so that I got all that junk mail and I got tired of
So
it. So
here
I
or
made
here?
another
Right
email
here. Okay.
that I never use for anything except, you know, like important stuff that I don't think will send me a whole bunch of junk. So it's just turned into about 4,000 emails. Every now and then I'll try to do those little stop things where they get rid of a whole
But I
bunch
do
of
want to
time,
walk around and get the
but it doesn't do much good unless I have time to sit for a
Okay, so if we take a look at the first article, how to fill in an LDC template. This is just, again, some information that came from teachers that have worked on it, and it's talking about the different, you know, filling in your text, what it is that you want to do, so kind of just like a little bit of a refresher of what we did yesterday. So you can go ahead and read this at your leisure, but I just thought it was a good article and kind of helpful as far as filling out the LDC templates. The other thing that I provided today was the LDC task template collection. I think I also shared this in the Google Doc folder, but I thought it was really good because if you are looking for something as far as how to set up those questions and helping you to start that teaching task, like that backwards design, what is my overall goal and what I'm going to do, these are some really good question stems for you to try to fill in to match maybe what it is for your assignment, because we all know what we're doing, and sometimes, you know, the wording can get a little bit tricky about how it is that we want to set some stuff up, and making sure that we're sticking with what it is that we're supposed to be doing. And so some of the demands for adding rigor to your teaching tasks, this is a really quick and short sentences on the very back of this packet, the LDC packet. Everybody have that? So that can come in very handy when you're planning. And then the next 3 documents of what we're going to use for what we're going to go over now is the how does the literacy differ from content area literacy? The reading process, it's just a front and back paper. And then the sample lesson where it starts off, it says bringing instructional design and quality assignments together. So these 3. All right, do I have a volunteer to read that first paragraph on how does disciplinary literacy differ from content area literacy? It should be this one right here. Okay. You read it? You want me to read it? Yes, please.
Content area literacy. While the early grades of learning to read include a great deal of narrative text, children also encounter expository text for learning in the content area curriculum. As students move through the grades, they learn to use a general set of strategies, such as predicting, questioning, and summarizing a text, to support their comprehension and response to text across the curriculum. These strategies are often used as procedures for study skills to learn and retain content information. Content area literacy, therefore, refers to a basic set of strategies for reading and responding to text with little differentiation among the content area subjects. For example, students may learn to use the same techniques for determining important information, making inferences, asking questions, and summarizing in science, social studies, and math. The reading strategies are the same across subject areas, only the content differs.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about in just a minute when we start hitting the literacy standards, what are the pivotal reading standards that should be the backbone, and you're going to find it in every content area when we're talking about reading. So it shouldn't be difficult to embed that within your content. The other thing that we're going to look at is the writing, okay? Because even though students are reading, we need to know what they know and what they got from what it is that they're reading. And people will say, well, we all read the same thing. However, I can guarantee you that if every one of us read something in here, even that paragraph, we could pick something different out because we all have different backgrounds, okay? The kids haven't developed enough of that yet, but we all come from different contents. We all come from different areas, different styles of learning, and even geographically from different places. So we carry that with us. So our interpretation of what we read can be very different. Does someone want to read the next paragraph about disciplinary literacy? All right, Mr. Hammond.
In contrast, disciplinary literacy focuses on teaching students the difference among the various texts used in different disciplines and the specialized reading practices required for comprehension and critical analysis of ideas within each. Some of these differences include specialized vocabulary, types of language used to communicate ideas, text structure, text features, such as boldface headings, vocabulary, diagrams, charts, photographs, captions, and sources of information within and across disciplines. Disciplinary literacy teaches students to move beyond the use of general reading strategies towards the use of specialized reading practices for making sense of the unique text found within each discipline. Each discipline represents knowledge and the ways of producing and communicating the knowledge differently, resulting in a different approach to reading. For example, when reading a literary text, there is a range of interpretations a reader can make based on background knowledge and experiences. When reading a history text or document, interpretations are based on a consideration of the source and context for the information as well as corroboration with other sources. Science and math texts present information with one truth or interpretation based on accepted methods for using evidence. In essence, the focus is on teaching students ways of thinking about text by developing reader identities for each discipline to become, for example, expert readers by reading like a historian, a scientist, and a mathematician.
And that is so true. When I started teaching many moons ago, anything that was reading was always left up to the English department. Oh, the English teachers will handle it. Well then, when we look at the different types of tests and things like that and standardized tests, it was like, okay, no, reading really becomes everybody's responsibility. Well, you all were already doing it, but it wasn't a matter of making it specific, and I'll tell you why, and why it's so important. How many people have looked at the ACT science test? Thank you, Ms. Anybody else looked at it? Have you ever seen it? Okay. ACT science is nothing more than a reading test. Okay? However, each one of the passages or areas that they're responsible for completing in that science portion of the test gives them a bunch of data that they need to read and synthesize in order to come up with the answer. I don't know about you, but as an English teacher, I haven't taught that stuff in my reading. that was never something that we would go over. We may look at a timeline and, you know, the beginning of a unit about the history, but we weren't ever synthesizing data. Now, the example that Ms. Weems gave us yesterday about what she does in her classroom totally emulates that kind of reading that you need to have in order to be successful on that science portion of the ACT. You're not going to get that in an English classroom. And I'm just being straight up honest. We don't do that kind of stuff. We do different stuff with analyzing and writing and stuff like that, but that's on the written word. I'm not taking graphs and charts and all that other kind of stuff and trying to fit it. So that's how reading really is everyone's responsibility. And I will tell you too, our science scores in the state of Alabama up until about 4 or 5 years ago when they actually changed the science standards, the reason overall in Alabama that our science scores on the ACT were so horrible is because our course of study did not at all resemble what was being tested on the ACT. Now, do I think we should be modifying to teach to a test? No, but if we want to be globally competitive with other areas, our kids need to be able to, because we know the emphasis now on STEM and even STEAM is so great that our kids need to be able to think and read in that way. I will tell you personal experience with my son. I asked him because, you know, he'll be a junior, so I shouldn't say finally. But he benchmarked on English, and his reading scores are just like in the toilet. And I kind of making fun of him. I mean, you know, I'm a mom, I can do that, I guess. If you look at his reading and his English score, okay, and then you look at his math and science score, and like I said, science is a reading test. I think it's a little bit more difficult than the actual reading portion of the ACT. You would think 2 different kids took that test. He blew the math and science out of the water, and the reading and English looks like he needs remediation. Of course, you know, Mr. Anderton is going, you know, I really wish he knew an English teacher that could help him with that. I'm like, you know, just stop. But I said to him, I said, your score, he got like a 14 on the reading and had a 26 on the science. Okay, I mean, like I said, 2 different kids. And of course, science interests him, math interests him. I said to him, I said, okay, their reading test, what is it? And it's very complex if you haven't looked at the science section. I said, what is it that you're doing? He goes, Mom, we do this crap in Miss Weems' class all the time. Crap, so you'll be able to talk to him about that again next year. But he said, no, we do this all the time. He said, that was easy. I said, okay, well, here's what you need to do for your reading. I said, don't start off with that literature stuff because I know you can't stand it. I said, you need to go to the nonfiction, the informational text, and do that first. So he did get those scores up in the reading, not where they need to be, and definitely not to where his science was. But that is exactly what he told me. So that stuff that Miss Weems was doing yesterday that she showed us with the guppies and everything, and she does stuff like that in her 9th grade classes as well, kids don't know that stuff, oh, that's going to help me on the ACT. It's just a trigger that they know that that's the way that what they're doing, and they're reading and thinking in her course. And I'm sure that there's other teachers that do that, but I just know because she's here at my school and I see what she does. Okay? So that's why it's so important to know, one, the literacy, how are we embedding those literacy standards, and how are we putting that in with our content? Okay, and making sure that we're identifying it. Okay, so disciplinary specific literacies. Will someone read that for me? Oh, Helen, I know you can't stand it. You got to read for me.
Okay. Disciplinary specific literacies. Each discipline has its own set of literacies based on the nature of the discipline. Key concepts, language, vocabulary, common text structures, and text features, and purposes and audiences for reading and writing relevant to the discipline. Understanding these different literacies is important not only for building knowledge in a discipline, but also for critically thinking about the information presented. In addition to effective reading and writing, students must learn literacy practices for thinking about how knowledge is created and produced in each discipline, how it connects to previous learning, and how to evaluate ideas presented for relevance, reliability, and trustworthiness. The factors related to effective learning in each discipline differ in the focus and intensity in which they are used for reading, thinking, and writing about content. For example, when reading a social studies text, students interpret information by considering the author, source, context, time and place when written, and corroboration with other texts on the same topic. When reading a text in math, the focus is on determining the accuracy of information presented rather than the source or context. In science, the reader may focus on diagrams and use the narrative text to support his or her understanding of graphics. In ELA, the reader identifies character actions, interactions, and motives to interpret storyline and themes.
Thank you. Okay, again, reiterating what I just said. Implications for instruction. Anyone want to read that?
I got it.
Thank you, Dr.
All right. Students in middle school and high school encounter more challenging, complex texts and are expected to use their knowledge of literacy, reading, writing, and oral communication practices to make sense of the content. The literacy demands in each discipline require continued instruction in how to approach a text, determine key ideas, critically evaluate the content, and communicate knowledge. Even students who enter these grades with a strong foundation of literacy skills and strategies benefit from explicit instruction in the disciplinary specific practices for effective reading, writing, and thinking about what they are learning in a discipline. This does not mean that disciplinary teachers should be reading teachers in the traditional sense, but it does mean that they need to teach students how to be discipline-specific readers and writers of increasingly complex texts. To do this, the disciplinary expert teachers can identify and integrate relevant literacy practices and promote effective understanding, analysis, and evaluation of text within a discipline.
Okay, thank you. And I think that we saw that in the examples that we were provided yesterday by Mr. Hammett, by Ms. Weems, and then by what Ms. Hill even showed us in the template that she goes over. So, like I said, it's not like it's like, okay, well, we're going to read today and we're reading. It's using that reading so that you're getting a multitude of different things and that students are able to extract and synthesize that information. Okay, so if we look at the literacy standards, now, if you are able to access the Google folder that I had shared with you all, you're going to find this in there, and then what Maria had done is she had also taken out like what was for history and science, I think, are put together, or social studies and the tech. Let me go back. What did she have put together? History and social studies, science and technical subjects, and I think there was one, and then ELA, and I think it was broken out separately. But in my mind, this is what our standards are. This is the way it comes. Everybody needs to know what it is that we're looking for. So if you look on the first page, page 105, this identifies how each of the standards are situated. Are we all together? This was yesterday. Anybody need a copy of it? Literacy standards for the content area.
You have it? I do have one in my classroom, but I don't have one here.
Everybody got it? Now, if you were searching for these, I don't know exactly how you would find it just like this, but this is actually Appendix C in the 2016 revised ELA standards. So you'll find that whole big document in that folder that I shared with you, but this is Appendix C. Okay?
It's in the ELA course of study.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
The back of the book.
Yeah. And then that's that big document that I shared with you. So page 105.
You can also find it on Alex.
Yeah, you can also find it on Alex. Just make sure you get the 2016 revised and not like the 2010 edition, because they've got the same cover. So on page 105, it talks about the way the reading standards are broken down. Key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, and then range of reading and level of text complexity. You will find that in every one of the standards, and that is how they're broken down into those ideas. Now, if you look at, just so you know, like the document and what we're working with, if you flip over to page 108, that talks about the writing standards, anchor standards for grades 6 through 12, and that's writing, okay? So the first set are your reading, the second set are your writing, just so that we're all clear with what it is and how they're broken down if you've never really looked at them before.
One out right here, as far as the grade levels, how it happens. Like here.
Not there yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Keep going there, okay.
Okay, so if we flip back over to page 106, you can see it's got like the gray heading. It's got the key ideas and details, which reading strategies, reading standards are there for literacy, history, social studies, grades 6 through 12. And then it breaks it down to craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, and then the range of reading and level of text complexity. If you look at the columns, it says grades 6 through 8 students, grades 9 through 10, and then grades 11 and through 11 and 12. And what happens as you progress from each grade level, it becomes a little bit more specific. But number one, if we look at number one under key ideas and details, it's still that same ideology, they're just building on it. So, for reading, and it would be listed as R1, site-specific textual evidence to support analysis of primary and secondary sources. Okay? Then, progressing to grades 9 through 10, the student should be able to cite specific textual evidence to support analysis of primary and secondary sources, attending to such features as the date and origin of the information. And then grades 11 through 12, cite specific textual evidence to support analysis of primary and secondary sources, connecting insights gained from specific details to an understanding of the text as a whole. Okay? So, that's how they're progressing. And what we found yet last year when we were going through this with cohort 1 is that there were 3 standards, 3 reading standards that should be the backbone for your lessons, and that each school selected one of the 3 to be the one that they were going to be focusing on in their classes last year. So the first one is number 1 that I just read. The second one that should be a backbone of all lessons is determine the central ideas or information of a primary or secondary source. Provide an accurate summary of how key events or ideas develop over the course of the text. Now I'm reading for grades 9 through 10 because the lower students don't split off as much as that. It's a little bit more broad, and then again it gets a little bit more specific in the grades 11 through 12.
Could you repeat the first one?
It's number 1.
Oh, okay.
And then the second one was R2, which is the second one, determine the central idea. And then the third one is under craft and structure, determine the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in a text, including vocabulary describing political, social, or economic aspects of history and social studies. Now remember, this is the history and social studies one. So if I was looking at number 4, craft and structure, under science and technical, it says determine the meaning of symbols, key terms, and other domain-specific words and phrases as they're used in specific scientific or technical context relevant to grades 9 and 10 texts and topics. Okay?
Say that?
That's under science.
Okay,
Oh, where in
Page
history?
107.
Okay.
Page 107, I was just pointing out the differences. Okay? So 1, 2, and 4 are what we identified last year as the crux of your literacy standards for lessons. Now, does that mean that I'm doing all 3 in a lesson? Probably not. But would I be covering all 3 in a module? Very much so. Okay? So then, and I'm not saying that the other ones are not important, but those are the ones that we felt that you should be able to identify in each one of the modules. Then if you look at your writing standards, before we get to writing standards, what I wanted to do is have you as a group at your table underline some of that academic vocabulary in each of the reading standards for your grade level that you feel are important to make sure that students understand. So for example, on page 106 for the history and social studies, if I look at R1, site-specific textual evidence to support analysis of primary and secondary sources attending to such features as the date and origin of the information, well, I would underline cite. I would also underline textual evidence, analysis, primary and secondary sources, origin. In that literacy standard, I would feel that that's important information that I need to make sure that I've defined in student-friendly terms so that my kids would know exactly what it is that they're supposed to be doing when they're reading. I could give a kid, let's say we're going to read the Scarlet Ibis, okay? And then I've got like maybe a poem that we're going to also use to compare something about a character in it. Well, my primary source is the Scarlet Ibis. My secondary source may be that poem and any other things that I pull out, because the primary thing that we're using for that module would be the Scarlet Ibis. Kids are not going to know that that's the primary source that we're looking at, and then the other things are the secondary sources. So making sure that they're clear in understanding is very important. Maybe you're doing something on World War II and you're using something in your textbook, and then they're also having to research and support it with some other stuff, knowing that those are secondary sources. So I think that's important for kids to know and understand, because if they go to college, they may have to know what primary and secondary sources are, and if we're not telling them, they're going to have no clue when they get there. And how many kids are going to go up to a professor and ask? Or if they're taking an online class, because we're seeing so many more kids taking online classes. So those are some things that I would think they would need to know. Analysis. Analysis is not writing a summary. Okay? That means you're going to have claim, you're going to have evidence, that textual support, and then you're going to have that commentary explaining how that piece of evidence supports whatever that claim is that you're making. Okay? So making sure that they understand analysis. And then the other thing that I think is important is origin. Again, some of them may not even know how to pronounce the word correctly. Alright? So that's why I think it's important to define some of those words, because we take for granted that they know exactly what that means, and there's nothing wrong with taking that standard and putting it into student-friendly terms. Because the takeaway from that is that we want the students to be able to do these things and understand why they're doing it. Okay, so now if you look at the writing, we didn't focus, that I remember, and Pam, correct me, anybody in cohort 1, we focused primarily on the reading. We did not pick specific writing standards. I think it's a little bit more difficult to do that. Writing standards that we should be focusing on as a school. I still think that reading is going to be the #1 fundamental thing, but that's something that we could talk about, because and the writing ones function the same as the reading do as well, as far as the content and it staying the same. So whatever, if you feel that at your school you want to pick a specific writing, that would be fine. But I really think that we need to kind of decide as a group, and not right now, but by the end of today, what reading standard or standards that we want to focus on specifically between that R1, that R2, and that R4. If you look at the other standards and you as your group, school group, think that maybe you should be focusing on those plus maybe an additional one, that's great, and we can identify that too. But that's something that I'll put in my notes to let let all of the schools know that we're going to be, each school has identified these are the reading standards that they need to be focusing on. Okay.
one focused on citing textual evidence.
at
Studies.
Douglas.
Did we read
I don't remember.
We did, at the middle school, we did R1 and W9.
R1 and W9. Okay. And if we want to continue with that, that's fine, because I'm sure they didn't master it by the end of the year.
And so my suggestion is continue and then maybe add one.
Yeah.
Because we need to continue to look at it.
The other two things kind of go hand in hand with this. And so the first document looks like this. It's called the Reading Process, Aligning Reading Skills to the Standards. And again, I've put all of the PowerPoints and everything into that folder. If there's something missing or that you want more information on, by all means let me know and I'll make sure that it gets in there. But what it does is, on the first page it says page 56 at the bottom of the PowerPoint slide. Does everybody have that, page 56? On the PowerPoint slide. No, today. Everybody got it?
There it is.
Okay, so what it does is on page 56, it tells you the skill category, the definition, and what it aligns with. The ability to identify appropriate text, and it aligns with W7 and W8. Active reading aligns with R2. Essential vocabulary aligns with R4. Academic integrity aligns with R1. And note-taking aligns with W1, 2, and 4. The idea is that when you are doing a lesson and you're creating your modules, is that you have your content standard, your reading standard, and a writing standard identified. So this was just something to help with, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. We're going to be reading in my class today. What assignments can I have that align with? Like what standards can I have it align with? And so these were just some examples that were used. If you look at this, and I think Ms. Hilly, I shared it with you, the working template that she showed us yesterday. It's a landscape instead of the portrait. Gives you a little bit more room to write type stuff than the other one. It says, okay, instructional design, what are the standards? It's got the quality assignment components, the content standard, the reading standard, and then the writing standard. What's the task? Tells you what the task is. What is the best way to solve problems of skills gap in the United States? After reading the article, Solving the Problem of the Skill Gap in the United States, write a letter to a friend in which you compare the two sides and argue for one of the points of view. Support your position with evidence from the text. 3, what are the resources? And so it tells you the different resources that they'll be using, and then what instruction. Okay? Then if I flip over, it gets a little bit more specific. The standards, the teaching task, preparing for the task, the skills, and the many tasks and resources that they'll be using. Again, the reading process, what are the skills and the many tasks and the resources that they'll be using. The transition to writing, and then even the writing process. So again, it's another module, example of a module and how it was created, utilizing the content, the reading, and the writing standards. And again, this was just an example that some of you are struggling with, like, okay, this is what I do in my class, this is the assignment, how do I get there, and I make sure that I've got all of this stuff and I've got a really good quality assignment. So again, just trying to provide you with an example of some of the things that you may be able to take out and plug in with your content-specific information. Anybody have any questions about the standards?
Where do you find the, well, I mean, I guess this is in the strategy list, cups and arms, I mean, how would we know?
Do what? That was one of the things that we talked about, and Pam and I, as far as teachers not knowing what that is, I would Google it, because I don't know exactly what that is, and that's why I said, you know, these are like teacher notes. You could even probably go to Core Tools maybe and even find it in there, but I would Google it first.
Okay.
Chances are you call it something else.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
You
That's the
probably
way it
do
is
it
with the
and call it
strategy.
something else. It could be twirl, you know,
Yeah.
for all I know.
Okay.
But that's a good question. And any of this stuff, like the graphic organizers, I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at those, but this is where Google is really an awesome, can be an awesome tool. But when you start Googling, you can kind of like spend a couple hours Googling, and then forget like what it was that you started off to do. But if you see any of those graphic organizers and you're like, wow, this looks like it's really good, but I'm not really sure how to use it or implement it, Google it, and you can find stuff on YouTube, Teaching Channel, any of those resources that can really help you to implement some of those graphic organizers and really get you to where we want to be with these things. And 9 times out of 10, you're probably doing it, we're just calling it something else. Do you have a question or something?
Darn.
Okay. Just listen. Okay.
Document.
Okay. Anyone have any questions at this point? Okay. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we're going to have Ms. April Daniel. She is going to present and show us what she does in teaching history through novels. All right? Okay. So about 10 minutes, we'll come back.
All right. Don't stress.
Did everybody sign in for day 2?
You never
Make sure that you sign in.
over this.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, but, you know, I mean, it will work out. I had to have Lily repeatedly. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Say it again. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Almost three this morning. The sweet thing she did say was, she said, Mom, you're such a good mom. I don't think I could have done them as a mom. And I would have said, yeah, Mom needs sleep. Go to sleep. And I thought, oh yeah, but you know, when your kids are hurting,
But the funny thing is, like, the teachers who really need to worry about it, don't worry about it.
Right.
And, like, I'm trying to do everything I can. I'm still.
I remember the first time I went through something, you know, it's been, and after 27 years, and we've gone through so much stuff, but I remember that a teacher came out and she was like, what are you stressing? In 1 year out the other, and I thought, what? Yeah, I was like, oh, you. But then I thought, okay, there's a little piece of that, yes.
You have to just say, okay, I'll do what they ask this time. Pretty much, a good teacher is a good teacher, a bad teacher is a bad teacher. You can implement.
And that's when you were talking about what, you know, why they can come in and work. I mean, you know, if you're doing the right thing, why aren't you coming in and working? Which I don't think planning with someone is a bad idea.
No.
It's like,
It's just, how do I take what I've already done that's good and put it in implement the thing?
right, that's the thing. You're doing it, now how do you play the game?
Yeah. It's just sad because.
Entry, why'd you say that?
That's exactly one.
Yeah. But it's just the reason they're doing it.
We just realized this a long time ago. Y'all are just now realizing.
That's the thing that, you know, when we used to have those fireworks on faculty meetings, and it just chew everybody out. And everybody would leave saying, why don't we just address the person that's doing it? Because the people that walk away feeling bad are the good teachers. The ones that are going. And the guy that they're talking to said,
He's just sitting over there eating or drinking or looking at his
yeah,
phone.
I mean, you know, I'm over here. What are y'all talking about? Doesn't even know what's going on, you know? And that's why that's not, I never wanted to be an administrator, but that is an administrative quality that I think they see that, you know? Address the fires, but don't put everybody on the chopping block, you know? Good job, good job.
Woo!
hey, I'll be over here. You know? But, of course, I guess guilty dogs do bark because occasionally it'll hit little nerve. But, you know, that's what I mean. But you'll reflect and, you know, modify and change if you need to. And like I said, the person that usually they're addressing.
No, I did not.
I got a hair appointment.
Charlie wasn't there in a minute.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to get her.
All right.
It should be okay.
This is the same theory with gun laws.
Yes.
The people who are going to be criminals are not going to follow the gun laws
Right,
anyway.
that's
so why
what,
do we
I
keep
mean,
making
I've
more
said
gun
that
laws?
so many times, you know, you're gonna make a new law. Okay, aren't we talking about the people who don't follow law?
Right, exactly.
I mean, if I'm gonna go out and mass murder people,
Am I
I'm
worried
thinking
about
your
the law?
little law is not gonna matter.
Yeah.
Same thing with a restraining order.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, that's
Oh,
gonna
it's
keep him
paper.
from coming over and killing
Yeah.
me? Right.
Yeah, I know. We'll just get some on our stuff.
I mean,
We need tougher gun laws. The people who want to murder you are not going to look at the gun laws.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, some of the checks and stuff like that, yeah, they probably do need to look at. You know, like one of those last guys, the military had already ID'd him.
Yeah.
No problem, but hey, they let this through. Those kind of things, sure.
But they'll still get a
Act
gun.
up on that. But yeah,
They'll still get a gun.
but they could be watched, followed,
Yeah.
maybe a little more restrictions, or maybe make it a little harder, but you're right. I mean, laws are only for people that are citizens.
I know. I cannot understand the broad No one should have a gun. I know, that was one of my, that was one of my debates. The whole country should be gun free.
We were going somewhere, and of course, my sister, I think, was extremely liberal, but we were going somewhere, and she was talking about, I mean, the lack of law enforcement or something, and I said, honey, welcome to the South. There's law enforcement in every one of those houses, okay?
Where she live?
Well, she's been in Hawaii for 6 years, but she's back in
Posted.
the DC
uploaded to
area
the
now. That's her
website
base, but she's worked all over the
So she
world.
thought that because she didn't see police officers.
I don't remember exactly what brought it up. I can't really remember, but she was something about that. And I said, you know, welcome to the South, baby.
We're all.
You think there's no law around here? Step in that guy's
Hey,
yard.
my preacher packs. My preacher packs. So, you know, you gotta defend your congregation.
I would have those written out and, you know.
He said, I'm armed with 2 things, the word of God and 9 millimeters.
Well, that's a good one. My husband doesn't go anywhere without one.
My husband doesn't either until he comes to the school and he has to walk in
that's
his car.
Yeah, he was going to say, oh, but it's not even supposed to be on campus.
Oh, never mind. He doesn't do that, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except for me, though.
Good.
But, you know, his thing is, if I'm involved in somebody shooting, I'm always going to fire a few rounds off at him. I mean, you know, instead of everybody getting at the mercy of it. Gun control is a good one.
Really, please. I don't even know what all you just said.
My son has a strategy because the Kiwis have a lot of land out there at Douglas, and he's already got the hill mapped out, and my husband has a pretty small little arsenal. So he's like, the plan is to load up all the guns, and then y'all head to the Kitty compound, and we will ward off. I'm like, oh my Of course, he's one of these in a nuclear attack that would like to be one that survives, not me. I'm like, no, Mad Max for going. I do not want to be there then. Just go ahead and let me ease on out. I hope you do make it, but I don't want to deal with that.
Is it full price or?
Around us because we had a student get shot one time. It was rolling yards and they like shot it up in the air and it ricocheted off the tree and hit him. So he wouldn't let us have anything to do with it. Crap about him.
We were out Scottyard once when we were in high school, and it was like a friend of us with us, a friend of theirs, you know, from one for the, and they came down person and with his shotgun. Of course, Helen said drop them right with serpentine. I mean, looking at through the ditch for about that. And the girl stopped and she was like calling his name, and I was like, crazy. And halfway down the road.